I think they did, right?
Our dream came true, and Assemblywoman Helen Thompson saw that billboard. She contacted us, and we ended up doing several projects with her, and she said that our project ended up influencing her decision to put anorexia nervosa and bulimia nervosa on a mental health parity bill that was just passed in California. And as an artist, I think I'm the most proud of this, of anything I've done, probably, because I think as visual artists, we often feel ineffectual. But here, we created something that may, in the long run, save people's lives.
Yeah.
So, art can make a difference.
Congratulations. That is a powerful use of repurposing public space and the landscape. You mentioned that repurposing, but when did it occur to you that you could actually use those vehicles of advertising in our landscape as kind of an art display?
Well, I have great foremothers like Barbara Kruger and Jenny Holzer who were working with text in the landscape, so I won't claim any originality in that particular act. But, always in my work, I've created pieces. This was the first time I created a billboard in the landscape, but I was always creating work in the landscape to whisper to the public as they enter that space, in a space where you're not expecting to see art. So it catches you unaware, and in a way you're more open, I think, as a viewer. So I'd say it was that interest and people like Jenny Holzer and Barbara Kruger that allowed me to think about that as an option.
And you mentioned how these public works can spiral outwards and how they start to incorporate the public as actual members of the artwork, if you will. And I know for a fact that you like to work in collaboration with others, not only the public in a more sort of voluntary way, but you also work directly with other artists. So I'd like to talk briefly about that focus and address kind of a common issue among artists. And we, in general, tend to be sort of independent, but we also want to become famous in our own right often. And I just want to know, does that jeopardize that feeling, or do you even have that feeling?
I want to get famous in other people's rights. No, I think for me, collaboration happens very naturally. I'm the kind of person who, through conversation, understand what it is that I'm thinking. I'm the kind of artist that, through creating something, I understand, again, what I'm thinking and feeling. So artists often start with an idea and then they make it. What I do is I dialogue with the people I'm collaborating with. I work on something, learn from that process, and move forward. So what I need to do is have things outside of my own body, outside of my private self, into a more public space in order to understand what it is that I'm doing. Mm-hmm. But I also think 10 minds can be more interesting than one.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Do you find that it's difficult for you, though, to maintain sort of your direction or your identity within the work?
Well, I've worked in, lots of different collaborative modes. Sometimes I do huge collaborations, let's say with groups of students. Sometimes I'm working with one or two individuals. Sometimes I'm working with whole coalitions of people when I was doing a Fulbright in Egypt. So in each case, the collaborative modality shifts a bit.
Okay. Well, that reminds me of a particular work that you did here in San Francisco that dealt with the Department of Space and Land Reclamation. And it was a large undertaking that kind of took place throughout the entire city with several hundred artists kind of performing these works. And you had worked alongside, I think it must have been somewhere between 20 and 30 other artists. And I just want to know, did you take a directorial role in that, or were you kind of one of the artists?
You mean dictatorial role? Well, let me walk us through that process, and I'll let you decide. So what we did in that instance is we knew we were going to work in the city of San Francisco. And we thought, together, what should we do there? And because I had a particular interest in desire, I thought myself, I put out, should we work with desire in the city? But we could look at desire in the financial district. We could look at desire in the red light district. We could look at desire in the shopping district. And we could make something that'll call attention to that desire. So then we had to figure out, and the we, in this case, was a group of graduate students and undergraduate students. And we had the discussion, well, what should we do out there? And I think the conversation naturally evolved to signs. What do you see in an urban space? Always signs. Now, then again, did I take a little bit of a directorial approach? Maybe, because I had, been making billboards and I had worked with signs in the public. So I offered that, but, there was a chance for dialoguing then. And then what we ended up doing is working with the no parking signs, because they're the most dominant signs probably in the city of San Francisco. But then the artist created signs that would say, instead of no parking, they might say no fearing fat. And then that sign would be placed outside of the Victoria's Secret building in Union Square in San Francisco, that kind of thing.
They fit into the landscape naturally, but they were strikingly bold in the statements they were making. And you also took that same approach to a project you worked on at the San Francisco Sanitary Fill. If you worked with students there in the landfill. So what was that like?
Wonderful, loving rats and garbage and such, but the landfill can be an amazing place. As a garbologist or as a budding garbologist, you can learn so much about the culture we participate in by looking at our waste stream. And I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if, as a group of graduate students for my graduate seminar, rather than sitting in the classroom, we remove ourselves and take ourselves to a public place. And we were offered a month's residency, 24-hour access to the dump. And we got to work there with those materials and with the staff. So the staff were doing their thing at the dump, and we were creating our performances and sculpture and making photographs, to 3 or 4 in the evening. And it was really cool. We had an exhibition there at the end and a catalog. And, my motivation for doing this as somebody who's both an instructor, an educator, and an artist is to get us all to think really about what it is we're creating, where we're creating it, who is our audience, and hopefully that broaden those graduate students' perspectives.
Much of the work you create seems fabricated, and you mentioned this earlier, to actually be photographed. How does the work, the performance, differ in the landscape from the object of the photograph?
Well, if we were to look at Cartier-Bresson and you thought of the decisive moment, I think that's what the photograph does. What the photograph does is it conflates the performance or the sculptural element that we're working with in the landscape to the landscape itself. So as you conflate that space and you photograph, you have this decisive moment, and it's the relationship of that particular landscape to the performance or object in front of it where meaning is created. But when you're doing a performance, it's vital, it's live, it's organic, it's unexpected. So when we were out there with the signs in the city, and we were in one of the crossings, and the artist held up signs that would read like, consomme or consuming landscapes in the sign of a caution sign,
right,
and they're stopping traffic.
Ed, yeah,
right.
When together read consumed.
Right. That has a different kind of energy than you could ever expect, and that's one of the things I love, because you can't anticipate. And also, I love that we do something that's outside and gets people to wake up a little bit from their everyday reality and maybe take delight, maybe piss them